Hi class, this is your video lecture for Tuesday, September 22nd. Today I want to spend a little bit more time talking about significant figures. So I'm going to go over parts of a worksheet here in this video. I will not do all the problems here, but I will post the answer key in today's folder as well. I just want to take a handful and go through them so you have a chance to listen to me talking you through them as opposed to just looking at an answer key. So let's get started. We're talking about significant figures again. And why are we talking about significant figures? Because significant figures tell us how accurate a measurement is. Remember that every measurement we do, there is some error involved in that measurement. Right? For example, we can't say that you ran the 50-meter dash in 4.78924368498252 seconds. We don't have that kind of precision in our measuring instruments. So we need to make sure that when we write down our answer, that we write it to reflect that amount of precision. And that's where significant figures come in. Some tools are more precise than others. So remember, for significant figures, we had our rules that any non-zero digit, any digit from 1 to 9, any non-zero digit will be significant. And always it will be significant. We're going to count that as a significant digit. Zeros are the beginning. There are leading zeros. They'll never count as a significant figure. Zeros that are captured, and by that I mean there is a number, a 1 to 9 on either side of it, so they're surrounded by non-zero numbers. Those always count as significant figures. And trailing zeros are the hard one. They depend. And if a trailing zero will count if there's a decimal point in your number. A trailing zero will count if there's a decimal point in your number. So that's a quick review of the rules. Let's apply them to some of our calculations here. So this worksheet asks us to circle the significant figures in each of the estimated measurements. So again, the hard part here is what to do with our zeros. So I'm going to kind of go through this and help you figure out a way that hopefully makes a little bit more sense for you as we're doing these. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go through and on my sheet here, anytime I see a leading, whoa, that's a little bit too thick. Anytime I see a leading zero, I'm going to cross it out. I am going to cross it out. So let's go through, let's get our line. It's not quite so thick. All right. Anytime I see a leading zero, I'm going to cross it out because we know those are never going to count. So let's cross those out. Let's cross these out. Do we see any other leading zeros? Yep, there's some more leading zeros. More leading zeros. More leading zeros. Lots of leading zeros on this page. Okay, I think I got them all. So again, it's the easy part. Right away, and when you see a leading zero, just strike it out. Just kind of cross it out because that's not going to impact your number of significant figures. Okay. Now this is helpful. This crossing out's helpful if you're just kind of trying to figure out how many significant figures you have. But be careful. Don't confuse that. Those zeros are still there when you're doing any multiplications. So you still need them for that. All right, now that we're done marking out our leading zeros, let's take a look at our trailing zeros. Again, so we're going to cross out the trailing zeros that don't count. Which ones don't count? The ones that do not have a decimal. So let's go through and cross them out. So here we have 2 zeros. There's no trailing zeros. There's no decimal point. We're going to cross them out. Whoa, this one has a bunch. This one does have a decimal point, so all those are going to count. This one has a decimal point, so all those are going to count. No decimal point. That zero doesn't count. Whoa, no decimal point. This zero doesn't count. Doesn't like me on this one. All right. No decimal point, so those zeros aren't going to count. Well, I missed some leading zeros right there. And I think, oh, there's another trailing zero without a decimal point. Another trailing zero without a decimal point. Oh, a little too big there. And this zero does have a decimal point. We're going to keep it. These zeros do not. These zeros do have a decimal point, so we're going to keep it. So just going through and doing those kinds of crossing out will help you quickly find your significant figures. Cross out all leading zeros and cross out the trailing zeros when there's no decimal. Now all that's left is to count the number of digits that are left, or in this case, circle the number of digits that are left. So let's make some circles. And let's see, what color is my circle going to be? Let's make our circle a nice color of blue. And that's a good thickness for our line. All right, so all those are significant. All those are significant. Those are significant. All right. So that one I'm going to have to move over a little bit. All right, so we see our circles here. I make sure it's clear to me when you're circling them whether you're meaning to include a certain digit or not. All right. Sometimes it's a little hard doing this with the computer, but the same thing with your pencil. If you make sure I can tell which one you are circling. These blue again. All right, yeah, this one's a big one. All those zeros count. Maybe I should be doing a square instead of a circle. It's a little bit, these aren't all that big. Oh, that one I didn't do too well. We're going to have to move that. I only want the 2 and the 5 here. Remember that trailing 0 did not count. Okay, make sure I can tell what you're circling and what you're not circling. All right, so you can see where I've got the red crossed out for the leading zeros. I have the red crossed out for the trailing zeros without a decimal. So all that's left is to circle the remaining numbers. All right, hopefully that makes sense. Let's do some rounding. Rounding seemed to be a challenge for several of the students last year, so let's talk through this. I'm going to do some underlines here again to make sure that we can kind of see what we're talking about. I want to underline how many sig figs we want, and then we're going to show you which figure we need to use to base our rounding. So we're asked to do 4 sig figs here. So I'm going to underline the first 4, 3.682. I'm going to do this for all of these right now. Remember, our leading zeros are not significant, so I'm not going to underline those guys. And the 375.6, that's the 4 there we want. And the captured zeros are significant. So there's the 4 there. And our 4 there. So what I've done here is just identify where our 4 significant figures are. Now what we have to do is look at what's beside those. Let's look at what's beside those, and we're going to use that to figure out how we're going to round our number. So let me go back to a circle here again. Right. So this 4, in this case, that's not going to work too well. Let's just do, I'll put a line on top of it. How's that? Right. So this 4 here, this guy is going to tell us how we're going to round this number. And what does that 4 tell you to do? That tells you that we don't round our 2 up. It tells you that we round it down. We just basically truncate this. So what's our answer here? Let me get this back to where I want this. Our answer here is going to be 3.682. Right? 3.682. We have those are 4 sig figs. And that 4 after the 2 tells you we're not going to round it up. So we just leave it as 3.682. Okay. Let's go over here and let's look at our next one. Right. Here we don't have any digits past it. Right? There's no digit over here that tells us how to round it. So this one's pretty easy. We just write down the same number again. Let's make this a little bit smaller. We can just write down the same number again. 0.003956. Oh, 3956. This one already had just its 4 significant figures. How about our next one? 375.6. There's our 4 that we're looking for. We're going to use our next digit here. In this case, it's this 5. What's a 5 tell you to do? 5 tells you we need to round up. We need to round up. So here our answer is going to be 375 point. Now that 5 tells us to round our 6 up. We're going to round it up to 7. Now we have it rounded to those 4 sig figs. Remember, what I want you to do is count out your sig figs. Look at the next digit past that. That's going to tell you we round up or round down. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, round up. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, round down, or just simply truncate what you have. Cut off what you have. All right. Again, let's look at this next one. We have an 8 here. What's that going to tell us how to do? That's going to tell us that our number should be, we're going to round up that 2. So we have 110.03. I'll leave this last one for you guys to try on your own. Let's do a couple of the 2 significant figures. Only do a couple of these and a couple of the ones. Let's go back here. Again, what I want to do, I'm going to underline the 2 sig figs that I'm looking for. Let's underline the 2 sig figs that I'm looking for. And I'll do those 3. I'll do these 3 numbers here. And let's look at the number that's just past it, because that's going to tell us how we're going to round it. So here's our number just past what we're looking at. That 5 tells us we need to round up. What's our answer going to be here? 11. Now here's our 2 sig figs. We have a 2.9. Our 7 here then will be our next digit. What's that going to tell us to do? That tells us to round up as well. So 2.9, we round it up. That 9 becomes a 0. Don't drop it. Don't just write 3, because then you've rounded it to just 1 significant figure. Right? Make sure that you keep your second significant figure. The 2.9 rounds up to 3.0. Okay, be careful. Next one, 177.5. We've got our 2 sig figs identified. Let's look at our next one. What's that 7 tell you to do? Again, that tells you to round up. So we're going to take that 1 and 7, that becomes an 8. But be careful here, because if you just stop there, you have 18, not 180. Don't move your decimal. Right? 177 doesn't round to 18. It'll round to 180. So please, please make sure you don't forget to put that 0 in at the end if you need it to keep your number in the right order of magnitude, right? We don't want to write 18. 177 does not round to 18. It rounds to 180. Now, if you notice, I did not put a decimal point here. Right? If I would have put a decimal point, that trailing 0 would have been significant, and we would have had 3 significant digits here. We were only asked to have 2, so we don't put that decimal point at the end. So our 0 there at the end is not significant. It's there for the number. This is 180, not 18. But that 0 at the end is not significant. I'll leave the others here for you to try. Again, the answer key will be later on in today's folder. Let's do a couple of the 1 sig figs. Again, I want to underline the number that we want to keep as our sig fig. Couple of these in here. If I make the line too short, it doesn't like it. Let's do this one. Okay, so now we've got our sig figs that we want to keep. Let's look for the sig figs that tell us what we're going to do. So we're only keeping 1, so we're going to look at this next digit here. What's that 2 tell us to do? Tells us round down. Tells us to round down. So what's our answer? 22 is going to round down to 20. Again, make sure you put that 0 in there. Don't round 22 down to 2. No, you moved your decimal. 22 rounds to 20. Again, make sure that 0 is there. Also note that I didn't put a decimal point after the 0. That would have made this trailing 0 significant, and we're only asked to have 1 significant figure. Let's look at our next one. What's this? Here's our number that tells us how we're going to round. Our second number here. That 9 tells us we're going to round up. So our 7 becomes an 8. Again, don't move your decimal. 79 doesn't round to 8. It rounds to 80. It rounds to 80. Put in your 0 there. Keep your decimal where it belongs. Don't start moving your numbers around. And let's look at the last one here. Lost my mouse. There we go. Again, we have a 9. That 9 tells us we're going to round up. So again, trailing zeros don't count for sig figs, but we still need them there because if we don't, we're going to move our decimal. So we're still going to keep that 0.0 in our number. But that 9 tells us we're going to round that 7 up to an 8. And now we're done. We have just our 1 sig fig. Now, why didn't I add a 0 at the end here? Because adding a 0 at the end doesn't change where the decimal is for this number. It definitely changed where the decimal was if I did 79 and just put 8. We really moved the decimal. But is there a difference between 0.08 and 0.080 as far as the decimal is concerned? No, it's not. So we don't need that 0 here. We don't need that 0. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to do the left side here. I'll let you guys do the right. Again, what I want to do here, we're going to look for the number of sig figs that we're asked for. Right. We're asked for 1. What's this 1 tell us to do? That tells us we're going to round down. So what's our number? 0.003. There's our 1 sig fig. All right. Let's look at our next one here then. So our next one says wants 2 sig figs. So let's move this guy. Oh, it's not going to let me do that. Too small of a number. Let's see. So we want 2 sig figs. So we're going to count off our 2. Remember, these leading zeros are not significant. Don't get confused by those. And we have this 9 here that's going to tell us how we're going to round. All right, what's that 9 do? It tells us to round up. It tells us to round up. So our answer, 0.003. The 9 tells us we're going to round that 1 up to a 2. Okay. And finally, our last one here. Let's get our numbers in. Let's get our lines in here. I got to get rid of these. They're too hard to drag. We're asked for 3 sig figs. So I'm going to underline all 3 here. What's our 4th one? 4th number is a 0. That tells us we're going to round down. So what's our answer here? 0.0032. I'm sorry, 319. The 0 tells us we're going to leave the 9 alone. All right, I'll leave the other one over here for you guys to try. And again, check your answer versus our answer key. Let's do a couple of these divisions here on the back and multiplications on the back. Remember how we did these. What was the important part? We had to figure out how many sig figs each number has. Figure out how many sig figs each number has. So I'm going to do these a little bit smaller here. Right, 18.264, that's got 5 sig figs. 7.8, that's got 2 sig figs. Which one is the smaller number? The 2 is. All right, so our answer is only allowed to have 2 sig figs. So if you plug this into your calculator, let's try this. 18.264. I'm going to divide that by 7.8. You get 2.354. Wow, lovely long number. 2.3415384. Move that over a little bit so it's easier to see. All right, we're only allowed 2 sig figs here. We're only allowed 2 sig figs. So what are our 2 sig figs? There they are. It's the 2 and the 3. We got to look to the next digit to figure out how we're going to round. That digit's a 4. So that 4 tells us we're going to leave our 3 alone. Our final answer here is simply 2.3. Okay. We do a multiplication down here. Let's see if I can find a good one. Yeah, let's do this one down here in the bottom corner of my page for right now. We need to figure out how many sig figs each number has. Again, looking at this 10, 10, this first 0 here, that's a captured 0. It's going to count. We do have a trailing 0. Is there a decimal point there? No. So that trailing 0 does not count. No decimal, no count. So here we have 3 sig figs. How about our next number? 31.00. So our trailing zeros, yes, they do have a decimal. So yes, they count. Here we have 4 sig figs. So how many sig figs are we allowed in our answer? We got to take the smallest number. We're only allowed 3 in our answer. Let's punch those into our calculator. What does our calculator tell us? 1010 times 31.00, and we're going to get 31310. That's what our calculator tells us. And we're only allowed to keep 3 sig figs. So we're going to look at those 3 sig figs. There they are. There's our 313. The next digit tells us what we're going to do. The 1 tells us we round down. Now, again, be careful. We're not moving our decimal point, so don't just simply chop off these numbers. You'll have the wrong number. 313 is not 31,310 rounded. Don't move your decimal point. If we're going to chop numbers here, make sure you put zeros in if you need to keep your decimal point there. So here our answer is going to be 31300. We have 3 sig figs there in our answer. Okay, let's see if I can find another one. Let's do this one here. How many? That's not what I wanted to do. How many sig figs do we have here? We have 5. Right? 5 sig figs. How many sig figs do we have here? 6. That's just 1 sig fig. Is our answer allowed to have then? Just 1. Let's put that into our calculator. 10.416 divided by 6. 1.736 is what our calculator will tell us. We're only allowed to have 1 sig fig, though. There's our 1. Our 7 tells us to do what? 7 tells us to round up. So we're going to round our 1 up. Our 1 now becomes simply a 2. And there's our 1 sig fig. Let's see. I'm going to do one more here. I'm trying to pick one that I think looks a little challenging. Let's do a multiplication just to have a little bit of fun. Let's do this one down here in the bottom corner. 1.8. How many sig figs do we have there? 3. I'm sorry, 1.8. 0. How many sig figs do we have? 3. Again, that trailing 0 counts because there's a decimal. 25.3. We also have 3 sig figs. Our answer is allowed to have 3 sig figs. Let's punch that into our calculator. What's our calculator tell us? 1.80 times 25.3 equals 45.54. There's our number from our calculator. Now we got to make sure we have only the 3 sig figs that we're looking for. Let's underline those first 3, 45.5. What's our next digit tell us? That 4 tells us we're going to leave it alone. Our answer then is 45.5. Now, why didn't I put a 0 after that? Why didn't I just change the 4 to a 0? Because if I put a 0 there, we'd have 4 significant figures. We don't want that. We're only allowed to have 3. So be careful when you put your zeros in or when you don't. You only need to put zeros in when it keeps your decimal point where it should be. So be very careful as you do that. All right. That's all I have for today. Please do the other ones that are on this worksheet. If you have questions on them, check against the answer key. Please try them yourself first before checking the answer key. That's the best way to learn. We will have a quiz on this on Friday, so I really need you to practice this as much as you can. If you still find this confusing, please reach out to me, and we can find a way to work together to help you understand this before the quiz on Friday. That's all I have for today, guys. Good luck. Please email me any questions. See you tomorrow. Bye.